What's up, guys? Coach Jared here from the Unfair Advantage podcast. I'll explain to Zach what that means later, but we just kind of changed our name of this podcast a few episodes ago to the Unfair Advantage podcast. Our special guest today is another Zach. We had a Zach on last week. Zach, are you CH or CK?
The right way, CH.
Okay, I thought you were CH. I think the last one was CK. So you're
Oh,
Cha.
wow. That was your first mistake. You saved the best for last. It's okay.
You're Zach. All right, so Zach over here
Yeah.
is one of my good buddies. We've known each other for I think I did the math. I opened Richmond Weightlifting in 2018, and I think
Yeah.
we probably messaged that year.
Yeah.
So
I think
it's
it's around
what
then.
been 6 or 7 years now.
Yeah,
So
it's been a
long
while.
time. We're kind of I would say we're not OG weightlifters, but we're old now, right? Like compared to
Yeah. I
some of
mean,
these
I've been
young bucks.
in
So
weightlifting since
Zach
2013, but yeah.
2013, wow. So I started CrossFit in 2013, didn't get into weightlifting until 2016. So
Oh,
you're
wow.
even more of an OG than me. But yeah, Zach Huse, he is the owner of Strength Works in St. Louis, Missouri. You are also recently now an international weightlifting coach, right?
Correct. Yes. Almost a senior international, but USA Weightlifting, they didn't want to give me 2 points for Pan Am medals, only for world medals. But yes, international coach.
I mean, that'll be soon, right?
Hopefully this year or next year.
That you'll be
Hopefully.
a senior international.
Yep.
Yeah. So Zach's been in the game a long time. He works with a ton of Olympic weightlifters. He lifts himself. He still sticks with it a lot better than I do. What are your best lifts?
Snatch 151, clean and jerk 195, total 340, back squat 290, front squat 250,
All right, now go through all those again
jerk
in pounds.
205, jerk 205.
So 151, like 332, right?
151, oh, pounds, you mean?
Yeah, let's go through them in pounds, just because we
Um,
got a lot of athletes that
okay,
listen.
so 151 is, yeah, 332, 195 clean and jerk is 430 something pounds. 290 back squat is like 640 something pounds. Front squat 250 kilos is like 551, I think. Jerk 205 kilos is 450 something pounds, maybe. Yeah, those are the main lifts I'd say, right?
Yep. What about you don't want to talk about your pulls?
Oh, I mean, my
That's the
best
one thing I
deadlift.
might have you
I mean,
do.
I just PR'd my deadlift double at 250 kilos,
There you
which
go.
is 550. But I mean, it's not nearly as impressive as my squat. That's kind of been consistent for me my whole career. Is my pulls kind of lower than my squat, which is something I've had to work on a lot by doing more pulls. But I think I'm probably good for like 260, maybe.
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
like
yeah.
to do 270. Like
Do
to
you think that's because you grew up playing football, right?
I did. I grew up playing football. I'm gonna be honest. The reason why I think that is because when I was young in my career, I did everything on my own. I was self-taught, so I avoided a lot of things that were hard or were uncomfortable or things that I was not good at. And one of those things was pulls. So my squat got really
Mhm.
strong, and my pulls lagged behind. Um, and I had a lot of injuries and stuff like that because I didn't want to focus on those things. So I had to get the bitch out of my heart, and and then that allowed me to work on my weaknesses, which made my lifts get better. So yeah, that's what I attribute it to, at least.
It's kinda funny because when I first started weightlifting, my weakness was my
Mm,
squat. I mean, it always was, but, um, I think I actually did when I was self-coached, I mean, I think my weakness was my squat because I was coming from CrossFit, and when you're in CrossFit, all you do is pick shit up off the ground, right? And so your back gets super strong. You don't really use any technique. Like you rarely even take things out of the rack, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and when I would squat incorrectly. Like I would basically do a good morning.
mm,
And then when I finally got a coach, like obviously like our whole goal was to like even that out. Um, and then I think I overdid it. Like I think every athlete too, like your strength is what makes you who you are,
Mhm.
right? To an extent. And I think I like basically just stopped pulling at all
Ah,
and like only squatted and like tried to get my quads stronger, which they do. They definitely need to get stronger, but like it was almost like tried to let my back get weaker to even it out. And I think I lost a lot of like kind of what made me good.
yeah.
So, anyways, I think you gotta be careful with that. You gotta kinda, like, keep I mean, you obviously squat a ton still, right? Like, you're not gonna
I
not
mean, I
squat.
only by a ton, I don't know if you mean by weight or frequency, but I mean, I squat 1 back squat day a week and 1 front squat day a week, that's it. And, I'm only doing 1 working set on each thing.
Jeez,
So I my my
that's
my
crazy.
squat volume is about as low as it probably could be. But for whatever reason, it seems to be working for me. I mean, I just did a 280 back squat double 2 days ago, which was a PR. In my deadlift volume, I'm actually doing double that. I'm doing 4 times a week, so my frequency is twice as much as my squat. And that's because, like I told you, my deadlift is down here, my squat's up here. I don't really feel like I have to do much to my squat at all, and I'm hitting 10 kilo PRs on things, just because naturally I feel like I'm a good squatter. Some
Yeah,
people have that, they're good pullers, good squatters, and others don't. And my pull is what lags behind, so I need to do more of those to, you know, apply to my lifts better, I think.
right, and I guess what I was saying is, like, I don't think I ever was gonna be that good of a squatter, like, regardless, like, I mean, I was squatting like you said, you're squatting, twice a week, essentially, 1 hard set, right? 1 top
Yeah,
set or something
one
like that
one
each
top
set. That's
set,
insane.
yeah,
Dude, I
back
was
squat, front
squatting
squat.
5 times a week, probably I mean, I was doing at one point, I was doing, like, 10 working sets a day. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, a
I
ton of
can't
and I
relate
had
to
to, though,
it.
but I
I
had to.
well, I did that, for a while, I was doing a similar style of training where I was squatting maybe like, 3 times a week or so, and I had working sets. And I would train with my athletes also past like year and a half, 2 years, and do the program that I would be giving to them, my national level athletes, but I would kind of slightly modify it for me because I'm 32 years old almost. But I mean, my quad tendons were just getting so beat up, and my knees were getting beat up, and it got to the point where I couldn't do the lifts like a snatch and clean and jerk how I wanted to because my legs hurt so bad. And I'm like, dude, I squat 290. Why am I doing all these squats? I was like,
Mhm.
let's decrease it to like the minimum effective dose. So I did 1 day a week back squat, 1 day a week front squat. And I was like, I'm just going to work up to one, top set of whatever feels good for the week. Obviously, I have a progression that I follow week to week and then be done. And then I'm like, minimal effective dose, keep my legs going. And then that will make my legs feel fresher for my Olympic lifts. And for whatever reason, for me personally, that's worked. There's a question in my mind sometimes if I did more volume, would my squat get stronger faster? Maybe. But the rate that it's going seems sufficient for me because the main goal for me is to put more energy into the snatch and clean and jerk, not so much into the squats because my squat is already so high comparatively.
Yeah, we train a lot of, football players and athletes, and we have to explain to them sometimes, kinda what you just said, how, um, you're a football player. You're not a power lifter. Like,
Exactly. Yep.
nobody cares how much you can squat. They care about how fast you are and how powerful you are, which means you have to have strong legs to be, fast and powerful. So, we're just gonna squat in a way to make your legs really strong and really powerful, not
Mhm.
necessarily like, like a power lifter who's trying to squat the most weight, right?
Yeah.
So, we're not maxing out, right, like, all the time,
Yeah.
like, you're
Well,
not
numbers are cool because in football you got a lot of people with egos, and you want to be the strongest
Mhm.
guy and all this stuff. And numbers are all good, but at the end of the day, I mean, like you said, if you're running really fast, if you got good size, and you're explosive, you're able to hit people, lay the little hit stick. You know what I'm saying? That's
That's right.
and then if you're in the right place at the right time in the scheme, that's what really matters. The squat, you know, it's just something to help you get stronger. But
So when did you just play football growing up then?
So I played football in high school, sophomore year through senior year. I was a team captain, And then I thought my career was over, like most high school athletes, I'd say, when they're done, because they're not going to go to college or D1 or anything like that. But I ended up going to University of Kentucky, and I was able to walk on, be a preferred walk on with the University of Kentucky team. So I played there for a stretch, and then realized that I liked training for football more than I liked playing football. I like the
Mhm.
idea of football, but I just didn't see myself going to the NFL or anything like that. And I was playing in the SEC, so I was playing against guys who were like actually good. You know what I mean? And so I was just a gym rat. I loved lifting. I loved training for football. I loved being strong. I loved being the strongest guy in the gym. So I found powerlifting and CrossFit and stuff like that. It was a way for me to kind of stay competitive outside of football because there was like some standard that you're chasing, right? And then through that, I found weightlifting, and I found guys like Kendrick Ferris, John North, stuff like that, Cal Strength on YouTube, and the rest was history. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I was like, I want to go to the Olympics. I want to do all these things, and so I just kind of dove all into weightlifting, and here I am, all these years later, still doing it. Haven't lost it yet.
That's right. Hanging on for dear life.
Hanging on, sometimes by a thread, but we're hanging on.
Them tendons, right? Hanging
Yeah,
on
dude.
for thread.
Yeah, man.
So I think a lot of like again, we train a lot of youth athletes and you know, they hear stories like you just said about how you enjoyed training more than you enjoyed football. And I think sometimes they think of that like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to train too much. And I think what people need to realize is that the fact that you love training so much is probably what got you to the University of Kentucky in the first place. Like, I mean, genetically, you're probably not built as the most gifted football player in the world, but the fact that you love training so much probably is partially what got you that far.
Yeah.
In the first place. So I think people just they diminish. They're like, oh, he's just because he worked out so much. Let's say they almost would say like, oh, because you worked out so much, you actually weren't as good as you could have been. It's like, probably not. You probably made the most of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think even as a walk-on, you still have to have some sort of genetic potential or talent to make it to that level. Um, so, I mean, hard work definitely plays a role into it. I think that there are definitely some people who are more talented than others, more skilled than others, just kind of naturally more athletic. And that could be because of upbringing. It could be because of environment. It could be because of genetics. Who knows? But I think, or a combination. But I mean, definitely hard work plays a big role in it. I once I went into high school football when I was 16, they had us lift the first day. It was like crazy. The first day of training was like max your squat, max your clean, max your bench press, and I'm over here
Yeah.
like I have no idea what any of this is. And ever since then, man, I was hooked. The reason why is because it's something in my control, right? Like in football, you're not always in control of everything that happens around you because of scheme, because of position, because of, the other guys on the field, the coaches, whatever. But in the weight room, it was something that was always in my control. I felt like what I put into the bar was a mirror that was going to give me, the results based on what I put into it. And to me, that was like a beautiful thing, right? It was like something that I can control. If I work really hard at XYZ and get these things better, then my, results or my measurables that I'm trying to attain are going to be better. So that
Right.
was something that really like, stuck with me, gave me a sense of peace, gave me a sense of, um, it made me feel like there was things that were attainable in life to me. So it made me want to keep pushing to get those things. So, but also, I mean, if you want to get to that level, like if you want to play D1 sports or something like that, you just also have to be a freak. So the only way
Right.
that you get like that is if you train hard. You know what I mean? Some people maybe have that more naturally, and some people like me, I had to train harder to get to that point, that minimum standard or so. But yeah, that's what I would say about that.
So when did you start weightlifting? How old were you?
Um, Seriously, weightlifting, I would say probably like my junior year in college. So how old would I be? Like 20, maybe?
So did you weightlift at all in high school? Like snatch, clean and jerk?
We did. cleans. It was basically no hook, no contact, cleans. I think my best that I got to no hook, no contact, like the way that they taught us how to do it, was 125 kilos. So that's 275.
No hook, no, legs, no nothing.
No
Like,
contact, just literally just
yeah,
like pulling it up into the catch. I think I did
yeah.
275, and that was the most I ever got to like that before I actually learned how to do a clean more properly. I still wasn't doing them properly when I first learned, but it was making contact, using a hook grip, some sort of leg drive.
Dude, you'd be surprised, like, how we go into a couple high schools, and help with their stuff, and, man, none of them use a hook grip, and they're not taught to use a hook grip. It's like, "Are you
Yeah,
serious?" Like,
yeah,
that's
I got to
step
get on my
1,
guys too.
right?
Well, I don't necessarily. So for my sports guys, I mean, when they're just learning with like the bar or like light weights, I don't really worry about the hook grip the first you know few days or whatever, because to me, it's just one more thing you got to think about. Your hands are hurting while you're learning all this stuff. But then
Mhm.
after you get the movement down and you're doing it, I'm like, all right, you need to hook grip, and I have
Yeah,
to
I
get on
mean, I think
that.
that's, like I guess, like, I harp on them pretty bad, but my thing is, like, do it now with the empty bar, get used to it then, and then build your tolerance as you get stronger. We'll get these high school players, kinda like you, let's say, and they, were able to get to 125 kilo clean without using hook grip. And then I'm like, hey, you need to use hook grip. And they've tried to put 125 kilos in their hands and their thumbs are about to explode because they got 125 kilos pressed into it. And it's like, well,
Exactly.
yeah, if you just would have fucking learned it when you first started, you wouldn't have 125 kilos. You know what I'm saying? You'd be
Yeah.
building that time. It's like these kids that, a lot of them get strong doing like leg press and shit essentially. And then they could squat a decent amount, but they put a bar on their back and they're like, "Oh, this hurts my back." And it's like, well, if you would have just squatted instead of doing leg press since you started, you would have built like a callus.
Yeah, well, I mean, you definitely get better at the things that you practice, and hook gripping is definitely something that helps you lift more weight. Obviously, that's why every weightlifter in the world does it. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do it. I probably say within the first like week or two, introduce it, and then or you could do it the first day, but you
Yeah,
know, you don't need a hook grip to hold 30 kilos in your hands.
right.
But I
But
mean, you can do
basically,
it,
the
you can
point
do it
is it's a
either way.
non-negotiable once
Yeah,
yeah,
you can do it
for
either
sure.
way. It's definitely
So do you
something that I tell everybody to do. Like, everybody should do it. Yeah.
gotcha. Um, so do you wish I was gonna ask one of the questions I would have here is, do you wish that you would have, like do you feel like you would have been a better athlete if you trained, more weightlifting when you were in high school?
More Olympic weightlifting, you mean?
Yeah, more Olympic weightlifting, or maybe just knew how to train more. Like if you trained like, if you had a coach like yourself,
Mhm.
coaching you when you were in high school and you incorporated, the Olympic lifts without with correct form, right? And you squatted appropriately, all those things. Cause I
Yeah.
don't know, when I was in high school, I didn't squat to depth. I didn't do anything like that.
Yeah, I think that I would definitely be better now if I had a me or someone who at least knew, the things that us coaches know. My football coach was our weight coach, our strength coach. And,
They always
yeah, and you kinda know what the standard looks like at that. The periodization model is basic at best, and the technique
they don't even know what
development.
periodization is, bro.
Yeah, well,
That
for sure.
periodization, they wouldn't even
Yeah,
know
I
what
mean,
that
it was
is.
basically like, let's just do a bunch of reps. They would write on the board, like, do a bunch of reps of this, and I mean, that's fine if you're just trying to get like a little pump or whatnot. I would say there's no like long term plan with it, obviously, and then the technical development wasn't really there. I think that if I would have learned a lot of these things that I had to unlearn and then relearn myself, it would definitely accelerated the process for me to be as strong as I am now or even stronger. Um, but yeah, that was kind of what drove me to want to learn more is, all these things not being right. And then you're like, I got to learn how to do it the right way. And then you're on that journey of learning. But yeah, no, definitely would have helped for sure.
All right, let's talk about your athletes. So you said you have like 100. weightlifting athletes, give or take?
Yeah, like 90 to 100, it fluctuates.
Awesome. And you guys do like you take a lot of athletes around to compete. Like I'll see you here in a couple weeks here at the Arnold.
Mhm.
But you've also taken athletes internationally. Kind of talk about that. Like what's the process like when somebody comes into your gym? Like, you know, how do you start them out, weightlifting a certain way? Just kind of take me through your coaching philosophies.
I could write a book on this stuff. Well, yes, I've had the opportunity, the privilege to take some athletes internationally in the past year, 2024. That was the first year that I was able to do that. We've had athletes in the past that have tried to qualify for teams, world teams, and have fallen short. This year, luckily, the guys and the guys and girl that we had been working on this for a few years, those things finally hit, and we were able to cash in on all that work, and it was a few year long process, so that was really cool. Going all over the place, Spain, Colombia, Ecuador, different places like that is really cool. And then in terms of how I would intake an athlete like a weightlifter, it really comes down to, I would say their goal. The first step is to meet the athlete where they're at, and then, try and figure out where you're at, where you're trying to be. Some people come into it and they're like, "Hey, I just want to, try weightlifting because it looks fun. I'm new to it." Some people are like, "I'm a pretty experienced weightlifter and I want to be competitive." Some people don't really care about Olympic weightlifting and they're just like, I want to do maybe strength and conditioning for a sport or something like that. Or other people are like, I just want to do strength training to stay strong and healthy. So it really just depends. Um, I basically just try to meet them where they're at. I do like some sort of assessment to see like, their fundamental movements like squatting, deadlifting, pressing, snatching if they're interested in weightlifting, Olympic or clean and jerk, stuff like that, see where they're at, and then we put together a program based on how many days a week they want to train, their skill level, injury history, all those things are considered, and if they're competing competition schedule, stuff like that. I think with George, Ava, and Henry, and Zach Noss. So Zach, he's one of my weightlifters. He's on the national team right now. He was a competitive weightlifter when I met him. He was already a national champion when I met him. So I didn't have to like convince him to be an international weightlifter. Henry, I met him at actually a national championship. His dad was trying to coach him in the back, and he didn't know what he was doing. Found out he lived in St. Louis, and he came to St. Louis. I met him when he was like 15, maybe 14, I think actually, and he wanted to compete in weightlifting, so that was that. George, he was a swimmer in college or in high school. So he was still in high school when I met him. He was a swimmer and diver and played volleyball as well. He didn't want to compete in weightlifting. He came to me wanting to just get back into some Olympic weightlifting because he used to do it as a kid, and he wanted to just do it so that maybe it would apply to his swimming and stuff like that. So he wanted a little bit of extra training, and then I noticed that he had potential, and I was like, you're moving pretty good. Why don't we put some weight on the bar? And so he put some weight on the bar, and I just noticed a lot of untapped potential. So I looked at the international standards to see where they were at versus where he was at, how much time he had. And I'm like, can we bridge the gap here and get you there? And so it really came down to a decision: is this something you want or not? And then he made a decision to let go of the other sports to pursue trying to make Team USA. And then with Ava, I met her because she came to the gym and she just wanted to get better at lifting. She had never done it, but she just wanted some sort of sport to try and do. And she was brand new, had never touched a bar before. So we started at the beginning, like any new athlete, like not with any expectations of being competitive or anything. And then she just over time got to the point where she's like one of the strongest in the country. And now she's trying to make a senior world team this year at Arnold Internationals. So I mean, everyone had different journeys to get to there, um, but that's kind of how the intake is. You meet them where they're at, and then as they progress and you see where they are, you just constantly reevaluate. Some people you can take to the next level, and others, maybe they don't care to go there or care to do that. So it just depends.
Yeah, I want to touch on, how like kind of George's path, how, he started out as a swimmer, and he even came to you basically just trying to be, get better at those sports through, learning some Olympic lifts, through, strength training, and kind of just realizing that he might be better at that than he is his other sports. We've had a couple athletes like that as well. Our job, most athletes come to us, they want to get better at baseball, football, basketball, whatever, and we're never going to push them to, weightlifting. It's going to be something they want to go towards on their own. And a lot of times we'll just let them finish their sport. If they're in high school, they might not have a college career in the sport, and we'll let them kind of see their sport all the way out through. And then we'll say, hey, if you want to still compete in something after high school, this is a great option for you.
Mhm.
But anyways, I do think more people need to know that weightlifting is an option. I think these
Yeah,
athletes that, these football players, for example, that are not going to go play in college, they need to understand that, or swimmers, or right, what baseball players, doesn't matter. They need to understand that weightlifting is an option, and they don't have to stop competing in something just because they graduate
yeah.
high school.
Well, George's story is interesting. He did weightlifting from a young age. He had a coach here in town named Ben Overcamp, who worked with him as a youth. And Ben Overcamp has developed some really great athletes like Tom Suma, George,
Mhm.
other people like that. They're all really technically sound. Um, but George took some time off from weightlifting because he had an injury. He didn't do any weightlifting for a few years, so he took like some significant time off, and he did like swimming, volleyball, stuff like that in high school. He came to me. He was a senior, or maybe he was. I think it was April or May. He was finishing up junior year, and then he was going into senior year. Um, he can't, his mom actually reached out to me and was like, "Hey, George wants to, start adding some weightlifting back into his training. Can he come and use your gym like 2 or 3 times a week in the morning and do some training? And would you write him some programming so that he could do some strength and conditioning stuff, some Olympic weightlifting stuff, and then do his sports stuff in high school?" He was going into his senior year, swimming, diving, and volleyball, and he really didn't enjoy doing swimming and stuff like that. But it was his senior year, and senior year is kind of like, you don't want to quit something on your senior year because it's your senior year. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, he just started doing it more and more. He was training like 3 days a week, and he was sending me videos, and then I would also see him at the gym. It just depended on if he went early in the morning or not. And he looked good, and I was just kept kind of peer pressuring him to add more and more weight. And finally, he would put some weight on the bar, and I'm like, dude, you're moving pretty good. You got some good potential. Um, this is a standard to make a junior world team. If you want to make Team USA, if you want to make junior worlds, um, coming up in Uzbekistan or in Spain or whatever, we could do this. And then, so he had to think about it. So his first day of senior year, I think he went to swim practice first, and then he came to the gym and he was like dead. He was like dog tired, and he just was like felt like shit. And I looked down, I'm like, dude, I don't think this is gonna work, man. I'm like, I don't think that you can do the work that you need to do to get where you need to be in weightlifting if you're doing all these other activities. Like, I just don't think it's gonna happen. And I
Mhm.
told him, I'm like, I don't want to be the guy to like tell a guy to quit his senior year because I know what it meant to be in a sports senior year because I that was me. And I was a team captain, so I mean, I get it. But I told him ultimately it's got to be your decision if that's something you want to do and pursue, or if you want to try and make the junior world team and like go all in to try and make this and make Team USA. So we had a conversation about it, and I told him what it was going to take, plainly, because I had some athletes in the past who tried to make it and then they quit. Like they didn't make it their first go around or their second go around, they bombed out or whatever, and then they quit weightlifting like entirely. They were like, I don't want to do this, which sucks because one of them was a national champ and she won national championships her first national meet. And then another one, he was also a silver medalist his first national meet at nationals. So they were both really good, but they both just they didn't ultimately didn't want it. So they quit. And then George, I laid it out for him. I'm like, dude, I don't want to put all this time into this, and effort into making this if we're not going to really go for it, go all in. It's going to be a process over, extended period of time, but I believe you can do it and I think you can do it, but it's got to be something you want. You got to go home and make a decision and, figure out if that's what you want. So he went home and he came back the next day and he texted me and he's like, I want to go for it. I want to do it. And so he quit swimming. He quit swimming and volleyball and he didn't do it and he went all into weightlifting. And his mom and dad were on board because he just wanted it. He felt like the opportunity was there to be excellent there. And he was a junior, so he only had a certain amount of time. So it wasn't so he only had like, a year or two to like make it happen, which is why he had to make a decision then. So it's not like he had more time than that. He only had a limited amount of time to make it as a junior. Um, yeah, so he went all in, ramped his training up, and then there was a lot of meets where he didn't make it. Every meet he was like basically opening at his PRs or opening at PRs to try and hit these totals to be top 10. And he bombed out once at nationals, which sucked. But one thing about him, he's really positive all the time, and I think that's key to success as well. Is even when shit doesn't go your way or whatever, you're not like throwing a fit and like losing your mind.
Mhm.
You're not on a roller coaster. He's like very like steady, even kill. Like something happens, he's like, oh, whatever, it's all good. It was fun. We'll get it next time. So yeah, and then we finally made it. It was cool. Last year, he made two teams and he medaled internationally as well. So it was kind of like all that work and all the trust he put into me and the process paid off, and it worked. It made it happen.
That's awesome. I think one thing you said in there was, like, that his parents were on board, and for kids, man, that's huge.
You got to
Like,
sell their
getting your
parents. You
parents
know
on board.
this. That's what you know. You got to sell their parents, not just the kids. The kids want all that stuff, but you got to get the parents on board.
Yeah, and, we always say your parents can either be your biggest ally, right, or your biggest hindrance, and that's any sport, right? It's at the end of the day, I think a lot of parents want it more than their kids do, right? And that's only gonna work for so long. We always say that, like, you can probably will your kid to play a sport in college, but once they get to college and they're on their own, like, that's gonna be it. That's all they're
Definitely.
gonna like, you're not gonna be able to will, your kid beyond that point. They're gonna need to want it for themselves, and it's kinda the same thing with weightlifting. Um, they are going to need to want trust me, weightlifting is hard, man. It's a
Charger.
grind. Yeah, you're good, bro. It's a grind, so you're gonna need to want it for yourself. I think
Well,
the
yeah,
other thing that
it's
you
brutal.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Weightlifting is a brutal sport. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think the other thing that's cool is, like, how you said George is kind of this even keel athlete. Like, we find that the best athletes, they don't get too up and they don't get too down, right? And, you were kind of talking about the not getting too down part, and that's huge. So, you know, I think that's the biggest thing that I struggle with as a coach is, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is dealing with the emotions of your lifters and, kind of riding that train. I mean, me as a lifter, if I bomb out, it is what it is, man. Like the way I always tell people, like I would open up very heavy when I competed because I was just not I was just a tier below everybody, like the top guys. But I still wanted to try to, podium at some of these meets. And in order to do that, I had hit PRs essentially, right?
And
And
you want
my
to give
thing
yourself a
was
shot.
exactly, bro. Like fourth place and bombing out to me was no different,
Yeah.
right? Like, what's the difference? I'm
I
leaving with
totally
nothing.
I totally get it, man. I mean, I call it, I've had this conversation with Ava, who, my lifter, Ava Biesterfeld. Follow her on
Hmm.
Instagram and follow her journey to make senior world team, not junior like George, senior. So you're really going against like Olympic hopefuls type shit. But
Hmm.
I tell her and George, like, the reason why they were so successful is because they have the mindsets of a champion, man. Like, you have to like be unrattleable. Like you have to not let a bad training session, a missed lift, a poor meet, a poor result in anything. You have to like not let anything bother you at all up here mentally. Like, of course, you can be up and down a little bit, but you can't have this. Like
Exactly.
you gotta because you gotta show up every day no matter if you want to or not. And the sport of weightlifting is a brutal sport. And being an elite athlete in nature is brutal because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people who you think are better than you. And that's kind of how D1 sports are too in pro sports. You're constantly comparing yourself to other athletes who may be more talented than you, may be stronger than you, maybe hitting bigger totals than you, may have already been to 5 world teams, all these things. And so, and you're seeing them on Instagram, you're seeing them on all this stuff. So you're constantly comparing yourself, and the weights get heavier and heavier. So the training gets harder and harder. And the better you get, the more volume you're doing, the more you're in the gym. That's less time you're able to hang out with your friends. That's less time you're able to, recover. That's less time you're able to do whatever the fuck. And then you add in work, or you add in school, you add in relationship, whatever. It's tough, and that's why it's
Mhm.
so hard. That's why it's so hard to be great, and that's why so few people are great, is because the stuff that it takes to get to being great outside the gym can be challenging, especially managing your emotions, managing your anxiety, your stress, all that, food, whatever. It's challenging, but I think that's one of the reasons why George and Ava are so successful as they are, is because they're just unrattleable, man. Things happen. They like bomb out, or they don't have a good day, or they miss a big lift they want to go for, and they're just like, oh, whatever. Move on to the next day. We'll get it next time. It's all good. They don't let anything get to them, and you got to be that way, I think. And I feel like I'm kind of like that as well. I like to think that I rubbed off on them a little bit, but I ultimately just think it's them. I think that's just how they're wired, and that's why they're so good.
I think that, like you mentioned, you can't get too down, but I also think the best athletes actually don't even get too up.
Yeah,
And
for
they
sure,
might for like a very, very short period, but I think getting too up is almost like it breeds complacency a little bit.
yeah.
I think some of your best athletes are gonna be like, yeah, sweet, I made that world team. Now what? Right?
I always tell them, I'm like, the hardest meet to bounce back from isn't a bad meet. The hardest meet to get your ass in gear after is a great meet, because
Mhm.
you hit that big lift, those big numbers, and you had a great meet, and you're like, "Oh, cool, the work paid off. Awesome." And then you go back into training and you're like, I earned a break. I don't need to go that hard. Look at that number I just hit. Like, I'm good. Like, I
Mhm.
don't have to really train that hard. You don't have that fire lit. You know what I mean? You gotta find a way to relight that fire. But after a bad meet, when you got embarrassed, or you feel like I didn't perform nearly how good I felt, you know, your fire's lit. Like, you're like, all right, I'm pissed off. I want to be better. Like, I have to do better next time. You're ready to get back after it in training. You know what I mean? Like, at least that's how I am. So that's what I always tell my lifters: the high highs and stuff. Those are the hardest ones to grind off of.
Absolutely. I think, you know, I even am guilty a little bit of setting numbers that you wanna hit, right? Like, you kinda have these arbitrary numbers that you put out there, and then once you hit those numbers at a meet, you're kinda like, "Oh, I did it," like, and then you're like, "Now what?" When in reality, I try to talk to my lifters like, "Quit putting these numbers out there that you need to hit," like, they're just arbitrary numbers, round numbers, like 100 or 150 or whatever. It's like, none of that matters, right? And it kinda goes back to that, being process driven versus kinda having these, like, goals. It's like, yeah, it's great to have goals, but you gotta the best athletes, man, they're like, I'm sure that once George and Ava qualified for these teams, it's like, they're just like, back to training, nothing changes.
It's tough to balance because the nature of weightlifting is number driven,
Yep.
because that's how competition is. That's how the international standards are. You're chasing international standard, and you're chasing beating other people's numbers by a kilo to make a team. And so every kilo counts on your total, and you're always focusing on, these are the lifts I'm going to be attempting. Here's our game plan. And you're pushing the numbers like you said, because you want your lifts to be meaningful. So you're like, you're really having to get comfortable with certain numbers and wrap your mind around certain numbers. It can at some point be counterproductive, like you mentioned, where you're so number oriented. Like, if you don't get that number, then you're thrown off your game or whatever. You know what I mean? Um, it's a balance, but also numbers. It's something that you can't hide from, something you can't be scared of. So I think it comes down to mindset, not getting too high off of a good win, or too low off of an L. But you're right, it's tough to manage that, manage expectations. But yeah, I mean, George made his first world championship team. He was dealing with an injury. It's interesting. It's like,
Oh, he's dealing with an injury? No way. Because point I'm getting at is like, dude, we just deal with all these people, and they don't like these kids, man. They don't understand that you're gonna hurt. Like you're
yeah,
gonna
for
hurt,
sure.
man,
I mean,
and
I
it's
I
tough.
could go on all day about that. But yeah, George, at the point we were getting ready for the world team qualifier, which was national championships last year, and he was dealing with an injury. He couldn't squat. His knees hurt. He couldn't do any squats, so we had to like modify everything. All of his weights were lighter, and we were getting up to the biggest meet of his career because we had to make the world team, or else everything we did was for basically nothing, right? Um, so we did the best we could, and we managed to hit some PRs, which was awesome despite the adversity. And then he went to the national championship qualifier, and he made the world team, which was awesome. But after he made the world team and he had that big performance, he PR'd his snatch, he PR'd his clean jerk, PR'd his total. It was awesome. It was like, well, for him, it was crazy because 4 days after that, he competed at Pan Am's in Colombia. So it was like compete at nationals and then 4 days later compete at Pan Am's, literally 4 days later, which is should not be allowed, but that's just how it shook out. But after that, he was like, dude, I need a break. Like I fucking hurt. I just pushed my body as hard as I could to get to this total. And you don't wanna train and push after that because like I said, you had the good result. You just medaled at Pan Am's, you just hit the total you needed to qualify for worlds. You're like, oh, we're good. Like he didn't want to train, but then it's like now you got to shift your focus almost from making it to okay, I'm on this team now. Now I got to go compete against the best in the world and
Right.
like try to put up even better performance. And it's like in 10 weeks, 12 weeks, which is not really like a super long time, right? So you don't really get a break. So it's kind of hard to like shift your focus sometimes, like you said, from like that, like trying to make something and then turn around immediately and be like, oh, I got to keep
Yeah.
going. I want to take a break. It's tough.
I think it's good though. Like breaks are good. I don't want to sound like I'm saying that breaks aren't good. I just think that they need to be purposeful. A lot of times you plan them out, right? And like we'll have athletes sometimes that don't want to take a break, and I'm like, no, you're gonna take a break. I heard Klokov one time say you got to crave the barbell. You got to make yourself crave the barbell sometimes, and I kind of like that because I've been burnt out before, and it's like I wish I would have
He was
just
there.
breaks, you know?
He was there. But I mean, that's kind of the nature of it. When I first told George when he first started that journey, I was like, it's going to be a long road. It's going to be hard. There's going to be times you don't want to train. There's going to be times you're like, I don't want to be here doing this. I don't want to grab the bar, but you have to do it because we have a timeline. We're on this kind of roller coaster, and you signed up for it. So I mean, it's kind of like the break happens when you're done with that. Because at that point after Worlds, he was done being a junior. So he took a break after that. So he had kind of like a point where he knew he was going to take a break, but
Right.
it's tough. Yeah, for sure. But I mean, ideally,
You're
in
like,
an
"Just
ideal
hang on."
situation, you just have someone go at a rate that they can sustain long term,
Yeah.
not something that you have to like really push, 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 push. Because you don't want someone to get burned out. But
But
it's just
that's
kind of the
not
nature.
realistic.
Well,
Not
for high
always realistic.
level performance, I mean, that's one of the reasons why you saw so many Olympic weightlifters drop out of running for the Olympics this past quad going into Paris because, like Mary Theisenlappen, for example, she did 7 international meets in a year. Can you imagine? That's an international meet every month and a half. So you get no rest, no recovery. You're expected to be at your top performance at all of these qualifiers because you're trying to make the team. So you got to hit the total to make the team, which is a high total. You got to be top 10 in the world, right? And I mean, there was no stopping. Once you're on the ride, you're on the ride, and you can't stop. You can't take a break because it is what it is. So it's tough. That's why it's hard for professional athletes as well. You know what I mean? There's not like a ton of breaks. In football, I guess you get an off season and stuff like that. But some sports it's year round, right? So I mean, that's just kind of
Yeah.
how it is. It's a different mindset.
Yeah, I think these kids, though, I think that's a big thing they need to understand. It's like, until you've trained at that level before, you just truly don't understand. That's kind of going back to like the injuries and, maybe not even injuries, but just dealing with, like you said, George's knees hurt. It's like, man, dude, some of these kids, if their knees hurt, like George's knees probably hurt, they'd be in an orthopedic surgeon's office, getting MRIs because they think they're gonna die,
Yeah.
right? Versus like George is just thinking like, yeah, that's just part of the deal. I need to take a couple weeks and let my knees chill out at
Or we
some
need to
point.
modify, or we
And
need to only do powers
yeah,
or box squat, or
exactly
there's
right.
like anything we can do to keep moving forward to make it to this deadline. But yeah, you're right. Some kids, man, it's like totally different.
It's not even just kids, right? Like, there's adults like that too, but, that's fine, like, I'm not necessarily advocating for you training through pain like that, but then you need to know right now that this sport is not for you, or just elite athletics is not for you. Like, you need to understand that right now. If you're not willing to go through some pain, and like you said, "Hey, I got a month before this competition," we got to just make it to that competition, and then I can maybe take a little bit of a break. If you can't push that extra month, and you're like, ah, screw it, I'm pulling out, or I'm just gonna deload the rest of the month, and then you go lift like shit. Like, it just ain't made for you, and I think you need to
Yeah.
understand that.
I think what I tell people is like elite athletics, like a lot of times you see people do like sports or they train or whatever to be healthy, to be, fit or whatever like that. Elite weightlifting, elite football, elite whatever, it's not
Easy.
healthy. It's not healthy.
No,
Like the goal is not to be healthy. The goal is to see how hard can I push my body until it breaks? How
it's a bell
hard can
curve,
I push to get this
right?
result? Yeah, and it's just like push, 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 push. Like, how much can I take? How much can I adapt to this? How much more can I do when I feel like shit? Like, just keep pushing. And it's like football, for example. It's like you're getting in a car crash every single play. And then you have sometimes like you go on a Sunday and then you play on a Thursday. You feel like shit. You haven't even recovered fully yet. And then you're like, oh, let's just get in 50 more car crashes today.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's like, and you just got to do it over and over and over and over and over. And if you hurt, it's like, who cares? So what? There's a line, right? There's some pain that maybe you don't push through, or some injuries you don't push through. But elite level athletics, especially weightlifting, is not healthy. Like, we're not training to be healthy. We're training to see what our body is capable of doing and how strong our body is capable of doing. In order to do that, your mind has to be extremely calloused and extremely strong as well.
I mean, look at me, I just had hip surgery, I don't have hip surgery if I don't compete in weightlifting,
That's
right?
crazy.
So, it's just
Hip surgery sounds so crazy to me.
yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I'm just not built to be a weightlifter probably. My hips are super narrow. I've got these really deep hip sockets. So essentially just taking something that's probably not built for weightlifting and forcing it, like it's like forcing a square peg through a round hole, right?
Yeah.
For so many years. And but anyways, it's not too big of a deal. But the point is
You
like
were a good weightlifter, man. I don't necessarily think that. You were a good weightlifter, man.
yeah, but I'm telling you, I'm not built to be a good weightlifter, man. Like I have no internal rotation. Like I have very like deep hip sockets. Like my dude, I have like a 30-inch waist. Like my waist is super narrow. Like I'm not built to squat. I'm built like to be a model or some shit. No,
Yeah,
not
you
just
are,
the way I
baby.
look, but
Yeah,
yeah.
you are.
But dude, I'm telling you, man, like so anyways, whatever. The point is like I'm okay with it. The surgery was not that big of a deal. The doctor told me because I did this surgery so that I can compete again. I would really like to compete again. And he told me, he's like, "Hey, if you compete again, that's fine, but you're gonna need a hip replacement." And he's like, "You're probably gonna need one either way. Um, but you're just gonna speed up that process." And I'm okay with that. It's just at the end of the day, like what the
You're willing to make
point I
that
think
sacrifice.
it's a sacrifice, and I think you need to understand it. Now, again, not everybody's gonna be like me and need hip surgery, or whatever, but I just think you need to understand that, like, when I was squatting 5 times a week, 6 times a week, I'd tell people that, and they're like, "That's not good for you, is it?" And I'm like, "No, I never said it was."
No,
You
it's
know what
not
I'm
good
saying?
for
Like,
it's not
I
good
never
for you.
said it was, bro.
You're absolutely right. It's not good for you.
Yeah, but
You
they're
gotta be
like
a little crazy, man. You gotta be a little crazy.
it's kinda even like when people talk shit about CrossFit, not saying like, it doesn't have its things, but it's like people are like, "Well, it's so bad for you." I'm like, "Yeah, well, these people that are competing in CrossFit, again, they're not doing it for the health benefits of it, right?" Like
It's the same exact thing as like elite weightlifting. It's like it's not healthy.
Now, if you do weightlifting and you do CrossFit at a very minor level, right?
It's probably
It's
very healthy.
great, very
I tell
healthy.
people, I'm like, if you wanna be healthy, go to the gym, like, 3 times a week, moderate moderately lift some weights that aren't really that hard, just enough to kinda move, go for a walk or 2 throughout the week. It's like, that's healthy. That is healthy, right? I always think to myself sometimes, I'm like, I'm pushing my body to, like, clean and jerk 200 kilos and back squat 300 and snatch 160 and do all these things, and I'm like, I wonder how hard it's gonna be for me to, like, stand up in, like, 20 years.
Well,
I'm just
you're
I'm just
looking
I
at
was
me,
just wondering. It's like, but at the end of the day, it's like, for me personally, the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is because it's like when it's all said and done and my career's over, I want to be able to say that I did certain things. And to
Yep.
me, that trade-off is something I'm willing to do. It's something I'm willing to sacrifice to say that I attained, what I had set out to attain all these years ago. I could say to myself, I knew I had it in me, and I did it. I was able to make it happen. So it's like all that time I put in, I wasn't wasting my time. You know what I mean? Um,
Mhm.
so for me, it's something I'm willing to trade off. Luckily I've been able to, keep going all these years. And, of course there's setbacks, right? Like small setbacks, but haven't had any like crazy setbacks, but I've been able to just keep going little by little. Um, but I mean, yeah, I mean, the trade off to me is worth it, just like you're talking about.
And it's funny because I 100% agree with you, and I think it's worth it, but I think if you told people what the trade-off was, like, let's be honest, for us, at
Up
least right
front, like
now,
when they walked in the door, like the up front.
I mean, well, let's think about this trade-off. Like, we're not really getting any money from the competitive part of it, right? Like, we're getting money from the coaching part of it, but
Yeah.
the lifting part, we're not really making any money, right? And
It
even at
definitely
the
helps with
Olympics,
buy-in. Definitely helps with buy-in if you coach a weightlifting team.
100%. You gotta have some credibility, and that's why I started out this whole podcast asking you about your numbers, right? But what I'm getting at is, like, I think if you told people a trade-off of, like, you're gonna need a hip replacement when you're older. You're going to, do this, you're gonna do that, but you're gonna at least get to say you were a national champion or whatever we're essentially saying. I think that trade-off sounds really stupid to a lot of people, but it doesn't to us, and I mean, like I said, that's my goal, and I'm pissed that I never won a nationals. Like that was just to
That's
me, it
my
was gonna
goal too, man.
happen.
That's my goal
Yeah,
too.
like,
I'm right there with you. It doesn't sound stupid to me because we both want the same thing.
but I think a lot of people aren't wired like that, and I think that athletes need to understand that you got to be a little stupid. I'm a little stupid when it comes to that. Like I know that how dumb it sounds when I speak it out loud. Like this doctor told me he's like, if you keep weightlifting, you're gonna need a hip replacement by the time you're 40. I'm like, yeah, sounds good.
See you
You know
then.
what I'm saying? Yeah, we'll see you in 10 years, bro.
See you then,
Like,
man.
whatever. I mean, I think the surgeries and technology is gonna be a lot better in 10 years, hopefully, so maybe I won't need one, but anyways,
Yeah.
I wanted to finish this off asking you a couple questions. First question, what advice, would you kinda give your younger self, both, as an athlete, like a football player, because we do have so many athletes that listen to this, and then also as a weightlifter? Like, what are some things you would have done differently?
You said as an athlete and as a weightlifter?
Yeah, so we could do both.
Gosh, I feel like these questions are always so tough to answer. I mean, as a weightlifter, I think getting a coach who knows what he's doing sooner would have been something that comes directly to my mind because it could have helped me avoid some obstacles that I had with injuries and poor decision making when it came to my training. But at the time, also I was working with the resources I had. You know, so it just kind of is what it is. But in a perfect world, I would have been able to have a coach earlier in my career. Um, Second, for the athlete, it's tough, man. Um,
What would you have changed about your training in high school? Again, I know your goal, it all led you to where you're at
here's
today,
what
but
I would
let's
have
say that
done.
you
Here's what I would have done
yeah.
differently: is I would have not let my coach put me in a position based on how strong I was. I
Mhm.
would have made sure my coach put me in a position based off of what I could be successful at in the next level.
That's a great I think a lot of people it comes to mind so I was a basketball player, actually. That was like I was an all-state basketball player in high school, and that comes to mind a lot because you get a lot of these tall kids, right? And they grow up tall. Well, they're okay, you're a center, right? You're a big man. You don't need to learn guard skills. You just need to go down low, learn how to shoot layups. Then they aren't the tallest guy, right? Either in high school or when they get to college, they're let's say even if they're 6'4", you know, guards are point guards are 6'4". We got 7 foot point guards in the NBA. And but anyways, they play this position because that's what their coach put them in, and they don't learn the skills of any other position.
Exactly. When I played football, my coach saw how big and strong I was, and he put me at offensive line and defensive line because he needed people at offensive line and defensive line. I
So that
went
was
to
what was best for him, not what was
for
best
him.
for you.
When I went to college, I played strong safety. And people sometimes when I tell them that, they laugh and they're like that right there.
Yeah.
And they're like, "How the fuck did you manage to make that transition?" And I'm gonna be honest, it was really fucking hard, man, because I had to learn a new position and I had to put out tape in like practice and put out tape through like training to show that I was able to, have these skills, do these things that they wanted me to do. And it would have been way easier for me to do that if I would have but in my mind at the time, I just wanted to do whatever I could to help the team to get playing time. And for
Mhm.
me, it was like a path to do that. But ultimately, it wasn't a path for me to be successful long run, at something like I'm not going to go D1 and be 300 plus pound lineman.
Right.
I'm just not in the SEC, but I could be some sort of skill player weighing what I did, like, 235, something like that. And I was running like a 4.6 40 at my fastest. So it wasn't terrible, but like I wish that I would have had that experience in high school, learning the scheme, playing that position, getting those skills so I didn't have to teach myself how to do that. So that's what I would advocate for yourself and do what's best for you long term, but, also be you wanna be a team player, right? So you gotta balance that. And then in weightlifting, hire professionals who knows what they're doing, and don't be stubborn and think that you know everything and try and have to figure everything out through error. But I mean, also that those experiences are valuable for me now. When I have athletes, I'm able to relate these things to
Mhm.
them, and that's experience that if I wouldn't have done that, I may have never been able to, relate to them in that way. So,
Yep.
I mean, it's all part of the process. Experience is the best teacher. Hindsight's 2020, but that's what I always tell people if you're trying to get better at weightlifting, get a coach who knows what the hell they're doing. Because the moment I did, my total went up. Crazy.
Weird. And it'll save you injuries, at least on my end, like,
Yeah, I
my
was getting
biggest thing
injured
when I
all
got
the time.
coached he dialed me back. He's like, "Dude, this shit's dumb. You be training way too much."
Or
That's
I
what
was just
pretty much
moving
what he
I was
told
just
me.
moving like shit, right? I was moving like
Right.
shit, putting myself in bad positions to be injured. And yeah, my ego was too big, right? I just wanted to keep going. I didn't really give a fuck what anyone told me. And yeah, that wasn't the move. It wasn't until it's not sometimes it's not until you hit that rock bottom, until you hit that low spot where you're like, I have to figure out something else.
Right. So my point was saying the injury thing was like, a lot of people talk about how we don't have the finances, to hire a coach. And I definitely understand that. I was in that one at that point one time, but I'll say, if you could trust me, my surgery wasn't free, you know. Like all the time
Cool.
that I've spent, coming back from all this stuff, it's not free, right? Time is money. So I would just if I had to do it over again, it's like it sucks, but bite the bullet, get a coach, and here's the thing, honest to God, if you at least start with a coach, I think most people they do it the wrong way. They go no coach and then coach. And it's like actually, if you were gonna actually go one way, it would be start with the coach. Let
And
them
then you
teach
go
you.
on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, then you can do your own thing maybe. But at least find a coach to start. the last question that I have for you,
Uh-huh.
and this kind of goes back to the name of this podcast. Now, we call it the Unfair Advantage Podcast, right? And the whole idea, it's kind of a play on words, or kind of a it's kind of an ironic thing. It's like, you know, life isn't fair. Sports aren't fair. Nothing's fair, right? So we have to create our own unfair advantages, right? Our own, things that are going to separate us. And it seems like every successful, business owner or successful athlete has traits, or a trait that kind of they feel like is their superpower, or their unfair advantage. So, what would you say is kind of your unfair advantage that kind of drives you forward, both in life, fatherhood, as well as business and weightlifting?
A couple things. I think my first trait that comes to my head is I'm very long-term vision oriented. So I think naturally I have a creative mind, and my thought is that we get to create the life that we want for ourselves. People like to think that things are out of their control, but at the end of the day, the decisions that you make and everything you do will determine the life that you have, right? So it's up to you to make the life that you want. So in that regard, I'm very good, I think, at thinking long term. Like, I want this, I want to be here, I want this result. So because I'm a coach, put a plan in place and try to get everything to be going towards that direction to get there. I think the next thing, my superpower, if you will, like you said, that doesn't have to do with just being like extremely talented, is being extremely persistent and consistent. I think that, my ability to just keep showing up when I don't want to, or when other people don't want to, or in weightlifting, you see so many people come and go, like flash in the pan, really good weightlifter, but they are only around for a year or two and then they're gone. Versus me, I've been here for coming on, 12 years, 10 years. Being able to keep showing up and just get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, and then just never quitting, never stopping, like never taking a break, never getting burnt out. It's like, oh, you feel burnout, you don't want to train, too bad, go train. Um, and it's like I feel like that's just kind of how I'm wired. I'm wired to just keep going until I get something, and then once I get something, it's cool, but it's like, all right, what's next? And then you have that long term vision, that long term why to kind of
Mhm.
guide your next move, your next decision. But those would be, I think, the two things that stick out in my mind is persistence and consistent is like keep going no matter what happens, and then keep going for a long time. And then long term vision, know what you want long term, and then do everything to get there.
Awesome, dude. That was awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. I'll see you in a couple weeks, right?
Yeah, I'll be at the Arnold brother. Whole team's gonna be there. It's gonna be lit.
Are you gonna be lifting?
Man, it sucks. I've almost had to give up the Arnold because
So many athletes.
yeah, man, I lift on Sunday and I have to coach like 13, 15, whatever people, depending on the year. And sometimes like 15, 16, 17 people. And then by the time I get to Sunday, dude, I'm like, can barely stand up. I like want to lay down. I'm like tired as shit. And there's just no way anymore. I love competing at the Arnold. Um, so I've had to just give it up. It sucks. But yes, I
Yeah.
will not be competing. I'll be maxing out in the training hall.
There you go. I'll see you
I wanna
there.
I wanna
Eight
squat
8 weeks
300 in
post
the
op.
training hall. What'd you say?
I'm like 8 weeks post op right now, so maybe we'll just try to blow out my hip in the training hall, see what I can squat.
Yeah, dude, let's get you clean and jerking 180 in the training hall. Fuck it.
My PT Jake will be there, so we'll see what he'll let me do.
He'll be there to reel you in.
That's right. That's right.
I gotta
Cool,
max
dude.
sometime in the training hall.
I'll get videos of you in the wrist wraps, right?
Dude, I'll put the wrist wraps on just to do my 300 squat.
There you go. Please, please.
I
You
had
know I'll
someone
share
comment on
it.
my deadlift the other day. I was doing a deadlift, and someone was like, I posted a deadlift video max out or whatever, and they're like, "Why are you wearing wrist wraps to deadlift?" And I'm like, "I'm deadlifting after my Olympic lifts, you
I
idiot."
was just cleaning, bro. Yeah.
Yes. He's like, "Why are you wearing wrist wraps to deadlift?" I'll put them on the
You're
squat just
too
for you.
famous. Bet. All right, bro. We'll talk soon, all right?
All right, man. See you, dude.